am here in studio. We are going to speak with some officials here from Marshfield. We've got Town Council Bob Galvin. Thanks for joining us today. And Chair of the Select Board, Lynne Fidler. Thank you again for joining us today. This is a topic that is hot here in Marshfield and a number of other towns, and that's the MBTA Communities Zoning Law. Some towns have adopted it. Some towns have not adopted it. Some towns are suing now about it, and Marshfield has now joined that fight. So we appreciate that. We hope you explain to us, because I know this is a complicated issue, and I know people are emotional about it, and they have questions about it, and they have the right to be. Bob Galvin, if you could explain to us exactly what they talk about, when they talk about multiple family housing allowed by right, if you could explain in layman's terms, the clearest way, what the Community Zoning Act is all about.
Sure. The MBTA Communities Act requires the town of Marshfield to adopt a zoning district that allows multi-family units by right. The amount of units is dependent on the size of the town, and multi-family are, two or more dwelling units in a single building. Okay.
When they say by right, that means that the zoning would be put there if somebody were to come in and wanted to put up housing that was more than single-family housing. By right, that's what that means.
It does.
Okay.
And I guess to make it the simplest explanation is it does not require any type of discretionary permit from the town of Marshfield, either a special permit or a variance. All it requires is the application for a building permit in compliance with our other existing regulations.
Okay. So, and one thing I brought up again, and correct me if I'm wrong, when they talk about this with multifamily, it would allow, I think, up to 15 units on one acre, one parcel of land?
It's actually a minimum of 15 units per acre. So that district that we've been directed by that law to create is minimum 15 units per acre.
But there's nothing in there about the word affordable, is there?
There's no requirement for affordable, but towns have the option to include some affordable.
Okay.
And that's what Marshfield had proposed to do back in 2024.
But in theory, if somebody wanted to come in, a developer, they could put up $1 million condos.
All market rate units.
Okay, you're right. There you go. So, because I see people arguing back and forth, and they're mixing apples and oranges as to what exactly the zoning is. That's why I wanted to make sure that we had that information out there correctly. So, Lynne Fidler, you're the chairman of the board of the select board here in Marshfield. This has been a big issue here, but you folks haven't remained, in the shadows about this. Recently, 3 things were done to deal with this.
Yes. So we have had multiple conversations in the past 2 months, going back really December 16th, when there was a no vote of 289 to 169 at our town meeting on December 16th. So we've been aware that the potential for compliance is out there, and we were trying to figure out what was going to happen. So last week we had our select board put up 3 motions, and with a vote of 2 to 1 on all 3 motions, we've decided to move ahead. And Bob has the legal action. He can explain that a little bit further. We're working with our legislative body to work on the state level, and we're going to argue that this is enough's enough, and we're going to move forward. We're going to be proactive and support our town meeting and honor that vote. And so here we go. This is what we're working towards.
So would it be fair to recap and say you sent a letter to the state auditor, Diana DeZoglio?
That's correct.
Also a letter to legislators to deal with this, and then filed a lawsuit. Bob Galvin, what's in the lawsuit?
The lawsuit, essentially in multiple counts, is a claim seeking to exclude Marshfield from the implementation of the MBTA Communities Act. The provision of the law, Chapter 29, Section 27C, is the unfunded mandate statute. When the auditor has determined that a particular law constitutes an unfunded mandate, a city or town has the right to file a lawsuit in the Superior Court for its county, seeking a conclusion that the effect of the law constitutes an unfunded mandate, and either delay the implementation of the law pending funding, or exempting the town until such time as funding is provided by the Commonwealth.
With non-compliance, what's at stake? I know that they were threatening towns, if you don't do it, we're going to take away some grants.
Yeah.
Now it looks like it's all grants?
Correct. The initial version of the law had 3 grant programs that were identified that you would be disqualified for. That was amended to 4. That's since been amended in the fall of 2024 to add additional 13. So there's 17 enumerated grant programs that the law says that Marshfield would be disqualified for receiving grants from. We've also, though, received a letter from the Housing and Livable Communities, the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities, formerly DHCD, advising us that the Healy-Polito administration considers a community's compliance with the MBTA Communities law a factor in determining all other discretionary grants.
So you mean Healy Driscoll? Kim Driscoll.
Excuse me. Yes,
it goes from the past one.
Yes,
but
sorry.
Just to play devil's advocate, but this really was pushed by Baker. This wasn't Healy and Driscoll that pushed this this regulation.
I haven't followed it that closely. Initially, it was a Baker law, and it has morphed over the years to be something significantly more than maybe even originally visioned.
Do you remember the last time that the state government, and just because you know how independent these towns are, has made such a push to push anything like this?
I haven't seen it.
Me neither. I've been here for 34 years.
No, I mean, you know, there are people that believe that 40B is a similar type burden on a community, but you know, Marshfield's done its job on 40B and now has sufficient affordable housing on its subsidized housing inventory, and it now has the right to say no to any 40B project.
Right. And, you know, it's interesting because a lot of towns would be envious of this number. They always say the goal was 10%, but very few local communities, as I remember, are anywhere near that number. Some towns are way down in the single digits. Yep. Marshfield's already at 10.3%, and from what we've covered over the years, it seems like Marshfield has always made an effort to be looking out, how can we do this? How can we get input from the community? Do you ever feel like, here's the touchy-feely part, do you feel like you're being, you know, no good deed goes unpunished? Do you feel like you're being punished for actually being responsible?
It took Marshfield a long time to reach its 10% affordable housing. Yeah. And you know, we made a lot of efforts, the zoning board, and, you know, Lynne Fidler, when she was on the zoning board, you know, had projects that were 40B. We really tried to find projects that would fit in a great location, because remember, the town doesn't choose the location. It's the developer that chooses the location. And a couple of very large projects in the last year here in the industrial park really put us over that threshold.
That's right. Now, with the area that you had designated, which would be the area with the MBTA Communities Zoning Act, that was a stretch there, if people are not familiar, right along 139 by, what are the boundaries? Is it the high school, the bank?
So if you started where the Furnace Brook parking lot is, and you went past the Granite area and all the way down to School Street on the right side, heading from the high school up towards the expressway.
Area that's pretty developed already.
It is, exactly.
So it means that would be the zoned area. You could do it. It doesn't guarantee that anything would ever be built there.
Yeah. And I mean, if people wanted to put their property and their buildings in a dumpster and start off from scratch, it's not rolling out a red carpet for those folks. We have the WRPD, and we need to Water Resource Protection District for those that aren't following the acronyms. But there's a lot that still needs to be done in the regulation side.
When people were voting against this at town meeting, not once but twice, what were the biggest objections? Did it fall into the same 2 or 3 comments, or was it all over the place?
I think there was a lot of misinformation on exactly what was being said in that zoning, and I think mostly, and I don't know if Bob would agree with me, it was say no to the state. You know, I mean, don't let them dictate to us what we're going to do and where we're going to do it. And so that came at a cost, and we're seeing it now. So, I mean, there were people that didn't believe that was a good thing, and it's not worth the cost that we could incur. But town meeting obviously felt otherwise, and here we go. So, I think the most important thing that we can recognize from this is that Marshfield is going to push back, and we are going to say no. And this is what was asked, and this is what we're going to do.
Bob, are there any misconceptions out there right now about this whole process that's maybe being floated out there as, I'm not going to say urban myth, as suburban myth, that people need to know that something's being said that's not correct, but this, in fact, is correct? Is there anything you'd like to...
I think when we were at town meeting in December, we still hadn't had the decision from the SJC case involving the town of Milton.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there was a certain element of the voters that were in attendance at town meeting that felt we shouldn't have been acting at it in the December town meeting because we still didn't know what the SJC was going to say in that Milton case. Mm-hmm. And on January 8th, they did answer the question, and these are kind of some seminal questions about the whole act itself. The first question was it constitutional? And second, could it be enforced other than by suspending a town from grant compliance? And the SJC answered those questions affirmatively, that it was a constitutional law and it was a law that could be enforced by the Attorney General and not simply by suspending or canceling someone's eligibility for grants. What the other aspect of the decision was that some guidelines that were kind of rushed through and not properly promulgated were avoided. And it's perhaps something that town meeting may have influenced town meeting to vote differently, but we were acting under a deadline of December 31st, 2024 in order to comply the last time. So I think those are the only that was the only information that voters didn't have in December that probably would have been relevant to them.
Legally, what are the next steps for the town? What's going to happen now? I know legal process, it's always longer than people think it is. There's multiple steps just for maybe what people in town need to know. Here's what we, meaning you folks, here's what's going to happen in the next 6 months.
Yeah. So we filed our lawsuit last Thursday. We provided a copy of the lawsuit to the Commonwealth on Friday. I've had conversations with the Assistant Attorney Generals. The formal complaint is being served on them as we speak. We will be going forward in all likelihood late this week or next week with a request for a preliminary injunction to try to preserve the status quo, to prevent the Commonwealth from suspending us from grant programs or denying us any other discretionary grants that we might need until the issue of whether this law is an unfunded mandate is determined.
And when you talk about some of these grants, I know, we can talk about grants in general, but some of this stuff is for real basic stuff that you count on, like for the fire department.
Yeah, there was a grant that was identified early on that allows us to clothe our firefighters with the proper clothing to perform their duties and responsibilities. And initially, it appeared that if the Commonwealth was going to deny us that grant, that money has been received, and that grant program does not seem to be affected. But we don't have a clear answer from the Commonwealth as to what they're going to deny us from.
Yeah, the end zone keeps changing. Right?
Yeah. Do you think the state legislature is going to get involved with this and rewrite this? I mean, that's a big question, but there's been so many questions about this, and I know, again, people very strong, independent, unique towns, and say, don't tell us what to do.
Exactly. So we've got a letter out to Senator O'Connor and Representative Kearney and Representative Sweezy. So I know they're going to work really hard at trying to work the budget and getting us exempt. And being in an adjacent community is also a big factor for Marshfield. I mean, what does that mean? We're on the Gatra, so you have to be a half a mile to get these zoning districts qualified. But we're gonna play that card and play it hard. So, and be back in touch with them, weekly as we're going through the process. But they have filed some bills in regard to this MBTA.
So it's this very fluid situation.
There's a lot going on.
It's hard to. Who would have thought 3 months ago that the state auditor would get involved in it? Bob Galvin, is there anything I haven't asked you that you think people or listeners need to know about this situation in Marshfield?
No, I think Marshfield voters asked their select board to fight on their behalf, and that's exactly what the select board is doing. They want this issue determined before they have to make another decision.
Okay.
And I think we're doing all we can do to try to deal with that. And I wouldn't be surprised if additional communities join Middleborough and Marshfield. Marshfield was Thursday, Middleborough was Friday, and there were other communities that have this on the docket for their decision making, and I wouldn't be surprised if other communities do as well.
Absolutely. Can I get you both to come back in a few months?
Yeah.
And we can do an update and talk
Can I
about
just
what's
add
happening.
one?
Of course.
Percent multifamily housing, 21.1% here in Marshfield. That's a big number. Multifamily housing is exactly what the state's looking for. And that's a percent of total housing. So there it is.
It almost seems like, when you might be arguing with somebody, and again, just my 2 cents, don't give me the facts, I've already made up my mind.
Yeah, well, the facts represent not opinion, they represent the facts.
Absolutely. But we certainly appreciate you both coming in here today to
Thank you for having us.
Oh, absolutely, to shed a little light on the situation, a story we've been following and will continue to follow, and we will put this interview up online as well. Again, Marshfield Town Council Bob Galvin and the Select Board Chair Lynne Fidler. You're welcome very much. I'm Christine James, 95.9 WATD, 5.9 WATD, 5.9 WATD.